Well then, I suppose that is all we have to discuss here, Mr. Drachner. Now all I need you to do is sign here, and there we go. You are now officially a colonel of independent Medzakan colonial region. Please accept my sincere congratulations and gratitude on behalf of both the Council and Medzaka itself. If we had more soldiers like you, then all our troubles would be a thing of the past. Now though, I don't exactly have any particular commission for you yet, but Governor Arcadian mentioned something about creating a new kind of weapon, one that would require operators to be in the field and the thick of the action. I will inform you when an opening for such a commission will become available, or perhaps you would like to try your luck with other units. It's up to you to decide that, Colonel. Now then, do not let me keep you. I'm sure you have plenty of work to do. Let's see now, who's next? Ah, Mr. Gerstein, please come in. Thank you, Lord Governor, and congratulations to you as well, Colonel. Although, now that I'm thinking about it, was that Mr. Drachner? From what I've heard, he was responsible for allowing some Frostling refugees to flee their city by boats. I have to say, I expected him to face a trial here, not receive a promotion. Unverified rumors from unreliable sources are not exactly ground to start our investigation. Besides, I do not believe them. Colonel Drachner has been extremely useful in our campaigns, and I don't believe he would disregard orders in such a blatant way, though if he did, I suppose I could understand his motives. Sure, some refugee ships appeared in the north, but they were all intercepted by privateers from Crimson Company, who either sent them to the bottom of the ocean or sold their crews into slavery. In fact, I have received a message a few days ago in which I was informed that a fast cutter was dispatched to bring our share of gold the company earned from selling them. So, even if Colonel Drachner did send them out, his actions benefited the colony in the end, which is all that matters. I see. Thank you for clarifying that, but can we get to business now? You wanted to see me. I did? Hold on, I've been awake for 4 days straight since the vote and I'm starting to lose my chain of thoughts. So many documents to sign and decisions to make. Ah, yes, I wanted to know whether or not you decided to accept the offer I made back in the council hall. Before you answer, though, I just want to let you know that I am not going to push you towards making a decision. It has to be your free choice, and if you ever decide that you do not wish to continue this conversation, then all you need to do is leave through these doors there, and I will not bother you again. That won't be necessary, Lord Arius. I don't really have any other place to go. After all, the only reason I ended up here was because I was Ishizawa's political rival, and he outmaneuvered me so much he practically exiled me here. I can't go back to the continent since nothing waits for me there, so I am willing to keep working for Medzaka, though I suppose receiving my old job back would be too much to ask for. I'm afraid so. As you know, the title of civilian governor was handed to Arcadian, whose managerial skills and vision for Medzaka's future are unparalleled. He wants to turn this place into a truly modern bastion of knowledge and prosperity, one where wisdom is not being jealously hoarded by a handful of officials from various guilds, but shared for the good of everyone. And while it certainly does sound a bit overly idealistic, it is nonetheless a worthy dream, and so we are going to pursue it. More than that though, despite the fact that there is no evidence against you, you are still recognizable as a face of previous council, and people would not look kindly if you were given your position once again. They wished for a change, after all. Worry not though, your skills will not be wasted, because while I can't make you a civilian governor again, I can offer you the position of Minister of Infrastructure, which basically means you will do what you did until now, expand and exploit the archipelago in order to bring prosperity to the country. Only difference is you will have to talk to Arcadian with it, and hopefully rein in his more outlandish ideas, since economic decisions will require both your and his signature in order to access money in the treasury. I understand. I see you've decided to go for Imperial School of Governance to ensure that no single person can make decision unchecked, which I approve. Out of curiosity though, how many ministries do you plan to establish? Not sure yet. I'm still working on it, though if you have any ideas then I'd be happy to receive your advice. For now, we have Nautical Ministry, led by Admiral Yarohin and representatives of some dockwalker unions, and Ministry of the Occult, led by Mr. Storm. He was more than happy to take up the position, especially since I told him that if he wouldn't accept it I would hand it over to Miss Pireni. Old Merchant faction is still working out who will be in charge of Ministry of Trade, and I believe leader of one of the craftsmen unions will take over Ministry of Labor. We're still undecided on Ministry of the Military and several others, but as I said, we're working on it. You clearly have put some thought into this, Arius. I just hope it will work out in the end, but to that end I probably have a duty to ensure it will work out, so I want to accept your offer, but, well, before I do that I want to come clean with something. It's about that black market trade you brought up in the council. I'll be honest with you, members of the noble faction were not the only ones using the black market. Many other councillors did, including myself. Of course you did. With trade laws we had, there was no other option for people in this colony to acquire some harmless but essential goods legally, so they had to resort to black market. Hell, even my own pistol has been procured illegally. Mr. Storm taught me long ago that trade is something that is almost impossible to control, and is instead far easier to regulate. If you will forbid people from buying certain goods, they will try to obtain them through other channels, opening a way for less scrupulous elements like smugglers or Crimson Company. They don't care about anything. If you can put a price tag on something or someone, they will sell it. So you knew all along, or at least suspected, but in that case, why did you only decide to throw your accusation at the noble party instead of all other councillors? Because there was no need to. Lord Nakira and his people were a major obstacle in my plans of breaking Medzaka from its stupor, so they were removed. As for others though, as I said, it was inevitable for them to resort to illegal trade, and locking up everyone wouldn't achieve anything. Now though that new leadership is in charge, we can change the laws and subvert illegal trade by removing many restrictions. So yes, I knew all along, even though I had to pretend I had no idea before quite a lot of people, including several members of Merchant faction. You certainly fooled me, Your Highness. So in that case, should I assume that my involvement in this matter will be forgotten? Thank you then. In that case, I can accept your offer without reservations, although I have to admit, despite your knowledge, all this feels just too perfect. Like the fact that you just happened to find a smuggler then on your way back. Let me guess, these smugglers were part of your deal with the Crimson Company as well. They probably informed you about their operations to get rid of them. Maybe they were rapidly growing competition? Almost, Mr. Gerstein. They didn't pay their share to the company, so the company revoked their protection and tipped us off about their base. That's it. Unbelievable. I don't even want to know the amount of planning this coup of yours took, Arius, but I suppose that's why you're in charge now. Very well then, I'll report to the Ministry of Infrastructure right away. One more question though. Of the people you invited here, were there any who rejected your offer and walked out? A handful, though less than I expected. Lord Nakir was sadly one of them. I don't even want to know what you proposed him, but if you don't mind, let me check these mysterious doors to freedom you so graciously offered. They look normal, they open normal— What the hell? There's no floor on the other side. How deep does this go? To the bottom of the cliff. So, give or take 80 meters. It was part of some old trap system in this abandoned mansion, and one of the main reasons why I decided to move my offices here. So what? Your offer is to either accept your proposition or die? It is still a choice, Mr. Gerstein, and it is extremely important to always give other side a choice. Only tyrants do otherwise. But I think I already took enough of your time, Mr. Gerstein. I'm looking forward to your report tomorrow. Now then, don't let me keep you. A new day dawned over the city of Medzaka, and, for most people, it was a day like any other one. Yes, a government was overthrown last night, but as far as revolutions go, this particular one was nothing to brag about, at least when it comes to its spectacularity. Perhaps it was all thanks to Arius' meticulous preparation of this plan, but even though he removed Old Council from power and disbanded it, no souls were lost on that day. Aside from, as some people said, his own. Perhaps it truly was thanks to his plan. After all, it was a walk of several years culminated in a single point, and gold that Prince's men threw at people of Medzaka, and alcohol they handed to them without reservation certainly helped. Or perhaps the Prince was just lucky, and simply happened to implement his idea on a good day. Maybe, as some government-sponsored chroniclers later wrote, he truly did have overwhelming support of the population, and simply used it to help common folk of Medzaka. Regardless of that, however, when sun rose on another day, the city of Medzaka, despite being technically leaderless, continued to function without a hitch. People of all backgrounds woke up in their beds, safe and secure, and then marched out to the streets to work, just like they would on any other day. The only visible difference was that soldiers of colonial army, together with rather nervous-looking civic guardsmen, were placed on nearly every corner and crossroads, wielding large books and pens instead of weapons. They asked every person they saw who they would like to see leading reborn Medzaka in this new age of expansion and exploration, and then carefully wrote down every answer they received. And the results of this vote proved to every politician and would-be leader that people of Medzaka not only had a certain particular sense of humor, but also prodigious ability to think for themselves. A lot of citizens jokingly gave their own names, and by the end of the day the lists were filled to the brim with candidates with only one vote, their own. Some teenagers, for everyone above the age of 10 was asked for their opinion, nominated a pet rat they found near sewer grate, and by evening that rat gathered more votes than any noble from the upper district or religious official from Temple of Azure Heart. A rowdy band of young orphans proposed some smelly, insane beggar who prowled back alleys of Port District, and for almost an hour said beggar was sitting right at the very top of the list. There were also other, even less coherent answers. I saw some crabs by the water, ranked rather high, followed shortly by how much for that doggy in the window. Despite that, however, pragmatism won over jokes most of the time, and the second spot was firmly taken over by Speaker of Medzakan largest labor union by midday, and remained unchanged until the end. And yet, a surprise did happen, and ended up placing none other but Commander Brimir Vestrand at place number 3. Asked about it afterwards, Brimir simply responded that he voted for himself for shits and giggles, to see how many people would vote for a random dwarf, whose only known qualities at the time were facts that he arrived together with Prince Arius, and after arresting the council he went on an alcoholic spree across all pubs in town, drinking dozens of people under the table. And, as it turns out, that strategy proved to be surprisingly effective, but in the end even Commander Brimir and a fomented unionist were not enough to change the final outcome. When the sun set, the votes were counted, and precisely at midnight, people of Medzaka were informed that Arius Erigen would be Lord Governor once again. And that was it. In a quiet ceremony in the middle of the night, the prince once again donned his official uniform and, together with his assistants and retainers, set off to work. But to the surprise of quite a lot of people, that work was less groundbreaking than anticipated. Sun rose once again, people walked or rode to work looking for signs of change, and found none. The prevailing opinion of the previous day was that the last son of Erigen bloodline would use this opportunity to turn the nation into a full-on monarchy and crown himself a king. Instead, Arius decided to leave the government as it was until now, an oligarchy led by members of Colonial Council. Only difference was, this time members of that council were appointed by Lord Governor himself, and he spared no time getting a new government up and running, so that the state could function without any delay. The first, most important position of civilian governor was handed over to former artificer Arcadian the Indomitable, who, as reluctantly as he could, accepted it, swearing to the stars that he will use his brilliant mind to bring people of these islands peace and prosperity, regardless of difficulties. Then, with Lord Arius in tow, he set off to appoint new councillors, although as it quickly became clear, it was Arius who actually made these choices, as his friends seemed mostly uninterested in political matters, and simply returned to his own workshop as quickly as he could. Once again, colonial citizens expected the prince to simply fill the government with his own loyal followers, but once more Arius surprised them by actually acting like he really had the will of his people in mind. Sure, some of his associates received quite notable positions. For example, Mr. Storm was to form an organized ministry of the occult that would be mostly focused on understanding the mysterious nature of these magic-filled islands. Admiral Yarohin became Minister of the Navy, although he focused mostly on military matters, while a group of other sailors and dockwalkers acted as his advisors. But while some positions were indeed taken over by known associates of Prince Arius, others were decidedly different. The most notable one was the Ministry of Labor, taken over by that unionist who secured second place in the vote, a person known to often oppose with views of Lord Erigen. In fact, over the coming weeks and months, they both often clashed within council halls while discussing various work-related topics, with both sides making compromises to ensure that Medzaka would work as best as it could to secure its dominant position on the archipelago, but without sacrificing laws, privileges and comforts of its common people. To many outside observers, these backs and forths between councillors were a proof that Lord Arius really did overthrow previous establishment for the good of Medzaka as a whole. Some, however, quietly murmured that these so-called disputes and deadlocks were nothing more than arranged spectacles, with both sides playing their prepared roles, while in reality Lord Governor made all decisions himself anyway. Whether or not this was true, however, one thing was clear. It was a time of many changes for Medzaka, some small and some extensive, after which this colonial nation could finally call itself a truly self-defined country. Many trade restrictions were lifted, greatly reducing influence that black marketeers long had over Medzaka. Embassies to other continental nations were re-established in order to better communicate with major players back home. The army was reorganized so that competence and aptitude mattered more than wealth or social status, and it was in fact this reform that was first major step that Medzaka took towards change. For after it was implemented in the army, Prince Arius decided to impose these meritocratic principles all across the colony, shaking old social order. Hereditary nobility, as he said, was not exactly working as a concept anymore. Sure, when noble houses were established, such titles were usually granted as thanks for service or exceptional skills. These skills, however, were not guaranteed to pass down family lines with blood, and so assuming that some person is better or worse than others simply because they were born under a certain crest was by itself a pretty ridiculous idea. And so from now on, these old family names would no longer hold power they used to, replaced instead by skills and knowledge, qualities that were readily available to all, even more so now when Arius's reforms made education far more affordable for even the poorest of workers. In fact, to outrage of many traditionalists, the new council itself was composed in significant part out of low-born commoners, simply because, in their field of expertise, they were far better than anything actual nobility had to offer. But although power of old nobility was diminished, it was not completely removed, and instead was reworked to fit this new theme Medzaka began developing for itself. Lord Arius was, after all, no fool. Aside from highest-ranking members of noble factions who were arrested during the coup, the colony still had its fair share of less influential nobles, who still remained a significant political and economic power. Some of them were merchants, some were soldiers, and overall many of them were, in their own way, useful to the colony, and so their houses were not disbanded. Instead, a major change was made. From now on, noble houses would not be just restricted to nobles of a single family, but to anyone willing to join them. If a lord and lady so desired, they could adopt a commoner into their house and grant them their family name. At the same time, succession of a noble house would no longer be an affair of birth but skill and personal ability, for from now on, every member of a noble house could vote for a new successor. Of course, it still meant that larger families were able to mostly keep the title to themselves, but from now on, they had to at least take their new members' opinions into account, something designed to blur the lines between those born under familiar crests from regular commoners. And although at first many nobles were not at all that interested, some very soon realized potential these new law had. Potential to increase influence and wealth of their houses even more using people who, previously, would probably not want to work for them. Very soon, leaders of major families began headhunting for skilled commoners to add to their ranks, and over the next months, years and decades, specialized great houses emerged, which focused their attention on one or several goals. Like, for example, House Erigen, main addition to which were Arcadian and Mr. Storm, who quickly took position as prominent military industrialists. Speaking of nobles, few days after the council was appointed, members of old noble faction began their trails, all of them except Lord Nakir, who mysteriously vanished from his cell in the middle of the night and was never seen again. The other three, however, faced the courts and, being found guilty, accepted their punishment, although in 3 different ways. One was outraged and unwilling to atone, and so was imprisoned and sent to walk off their debts to society in the mines, while their familial estate and fortune were seized by Lord Governor. Second one chose banishment and was sent back to the continent where, very quickly, all traces of them were lost in the growing tensions. And finally, the third one decided to sell all of their possessions, hand over their wealth to various charity organizations and orphanages, and joined Cult of Azure Heart. Mere weeks later, they departed on a pilgrimage deeper into the Isles in order to find atonement for their sins, and with that, the trails were over. Though it has to be said that, at this point, not many people in the city and colony itself were interested in them. But of course, it is important to mention that Metzaka was not just the city, but an entire country, and after the revolution there was a risk that said country would fragment once again. Fortunately, thanks to proper preparations on Arius' side, people in charge of various settlements and islands were mostly loyal to him, or at the very least to the idea of united colony, and remained within Metzakan borders. In fact, settlements of Rithila and Kuzane were officially integrated into Metzaka as well, and vowed to work together to ensure safety of the region, with representatives of every major settlement receiving place in the council, which was quickly growing to rather impressive numbers. And finally, another major thing that changed was the law that allowed use of undead workforce. With more and more people arriving from the continent every day, Metzaka stood against a troubling situation where many of new arrivals could not find jobs in either of the cities and were too poor or too unskilled to establish farms or secured islands. One of the main reasons for that, of course, was prodigious use of mindless undead who toiled in factories and workshops all over the colony, their shambling, rotting hands working day and night without even a moment of break. At first, Arius argued that they should be left alone. After all, they did all the menial, mindless tasks of untrained, uneducated workforce. Minister of Labour, however, argued that this was the main issue. Uneducated workforce, despite increased education budget, was still a significant part of the colony, and so they should not be replaced by undead. After all, unqualified workers, unlike their rotten counterparts, could learn, and so new law was introduced that ensured that, in most cases, living workers would receive a priority during hiring processes. Of course, very soon first loopholes were found, as certain workers used this new law to get jobs in which they weren't actually doing anything, but such practices were quickly rooted out and punished, quite appropriately with forced labor. The mindless shamblers still remained though, but they were mostly now used for either truly mind-numbing or dangerous tasks, while excess ones were simply dismantled and stored in crypts and catacombs to wait for a time where they would be needed again. But all of this, reforms, work, diplomacy, was clearly not the main goal of Lord Governor Arius Erigen, for as soon as he ensured that his position was secured, he immediately focused his efforts on improving Metzakan military. Soon, rumors began circulating about yet another planned expedition, this time to the south, where a mysterious enemy was terrorizing an island full of forest dwellers. And though said forest dwellers were not exactly viewed with much kindness in Metzaka, many wondered just how useful they could be to the colony. And so when the prince officially opened recruitment offices across the country, many people eagerly joined in, especially when they learned just how many new machines colonial force would bring to the field. The upcoming campaign, as it seemed, would be fought equally by men and machines, with a main focus on machines keeping the soldiers safe. but mostly it was one of Arcadian's new inventions that brought starry-eyed recruits to their barracks, a device so powerful and yet so hellish that everyone who witnessed it in action simply had to accept its superiority over anything Medzakans could bring to the field until now. Understood. I honestly don't know what to say to you, Relis. You can't expect me to just close all diplomatic channels with Cridians and Republics simply because your father said so. First and foremost, we are a neutral party here. We are not allied to goblins, and while we do work together with Crimson Star, our cooperation is not exactly official precisely to maintain our neutrality. Besides, we do not work against you with them. Not directly, you want to say? But I understand what you mean, and I will try to explain this to my father, but you must understand that he still has the rest of Emerald Council to contend with. And with that incident from last month still echoing on political scene, more and more of our kings and queens demand decisive action. Forcing you to submit to our demands would be viewed as such a thing, and it is far more preferable than all-out war. I see. I suppose some gesture of goodwill would not go amiss here. From both sides, of course. I'll have to think about this, Raylis. Give me a week or two so I could discuss it with the rest of the council, and I will call you back. In the meantime, stay safe out there, and remember that we are far away from the continent and we can afford to think for ourselves here. Erigen out. Now then, apologies for keeping you waiting for so long, Governor. Unfortunately, the situation back home became so desperate that it's starting to affect us here, and in more ways than just ships full of refugees. So I've heard. You certainly sounded serious during that talk, and you haven't joked with really even once, so the situation really must be dire. But I'm not really in the loop when it comes to their conflict against goblins. Care to explain to me what was that incident you mentioned? One that shouldn't have happened. There was some minor border skirmish between republics and the council. Nothing much, just some posturing, but some lives were lost. Now, that's nothing new. They've been shooting each other over the border for the past few years now, but this time some high-ranking officers fell on both sides. And what's worse, it turned out that both units that were engaged in this fight were supplied by the same Cridian merchant, who also sold them a lot of alcohol very cheap shortly before the incident. So naturally, everyone claims that this merchant wanted to start hostilities, and though he is not officially affiliated with Crimson Company, everyone assumed that he is, which caused outrage in Emerald Council. They were already furious at the company for supplying the republics, but after that mess, High King broke all contacts with them and issued a full embargo against their merchants. And to make matters bad for us, he also demanded that other known business partners of Crimson Star cease all trade with them as well. And while Southern and Republics can easily ignore it, we are not so lucky, especially not with Raylis and her colonists right on our southern doorstep. Bloody politics. So, should I expect that you'll be marching out soon to fight, really? I hope it won't come to it, but we cannot discount such a possibility, should her father give her the order to bring us to heel. There already are some repercussions as well. The joint attack Raylis and I planned against that undead army was called off, and some merchants already left our cities. I hope this will be the end of it though. We don't really need any more problems now, especially not in light of the letter I received this morning. Here, take a look. You may not recognize the handwriting, but the crest at the top should bring some memories. Is this? Bloody hell it is! It's Hagren's stamp! So good old Cavill's still alive. I was sure he got his head chopped off during or after the revolution. I thought so myself, but as it turns out, he is quite well. Very well, in fact. Sadly, I wouldn't expect us to have a reunion anytime soon, at least not a pleasant one. You see, that letter wasn't just a courtesy, it was also a confession of sorts. Turns out, Cavill joined Ishizawa's side few days before Melgo fell to keep his people safe. I can't really hold it against him. We all know how bad the situation was for royalist forces, but that's not the end of story. Shortly after the revolution, Ishizawa recognized his skills and hired him, so now General Hegren works for him, at least as long as he wants to ensure safety of his family. But for us, the important part of the letter is here, where he writes that he was sent to the archipelago, this archipelago, to act as Governor General of Southern Colonies. So they're here as well. I suppose it was only a matter of time before Ishizawa turned his attention here, and truth be told, I'm still surprised it took him so long. So, what's the deal then? Should we start preparing for Republican warships? That's the thing, I'm not sure. This letter is written in a way that makes me think that Ishizawa doesn't trust General Hegren and has his agents monitoring his correspondence. You remember how Cavil talked and wrote? He was always all over the place with wild anecdotes and jokes, but this letter is toned down and serious. Still, he wrote here that while he was happy to hear about my survival, he would rather not meet again, which I believe is his way of saying that if we don't want to go to war against our former homeland right now, we should probably keep our distance. And I agree wholeheartedly with that plan. But I have to say, it's still weird hearing it from you. A few years back you were fuming with rage at the very mention of the Republic, and now here you are, trying to keep peace with them. I understood my mistakes, in no small part thanks to you, old friend. But here I go rambling again. You certainly came here for a reason. So, let's hear it. First, I wanted to do my usual complaining about your decision to make me governor of this place. Every time I have to deal with Gerstein or some other pompous politician, I'm barely containing the urge to blow them up. I'm just not a good pick for the job. You are good for parts of the job. You have brilliant mind and ideas. Gerstein has diplomatic tact and knowledge of politics and economy. Together you should be unstoppable. Yes, so you keep saying, but I don't actually want to talk about it right now, it's boring. On to something more pleasant. You remember that new machine I've been developing lately? The one I kept in secret? Well, a few days ago I finally finished the first prototype, and I'd like you to help me name it. Gladly. What is it? You see, that's the issue here. I asked the same question to some of my assistants. Then I asked more of my assistants. Then I asked some random people I met on the street, and all of them gave me the exact same answer, even when they haven't actually seen the machine I made. It's almost as if people's minds are wired to think in the same way about this thing, like it's predetermined or something. So I want you to give me the first name that comes to your mind. Now! Fine, if you want. Let me think for a second. Fortunate Son. Name it Fortunate Son. Stars, damn it, everyone gave the exact same answer. I don't know how to respond to that. Maybe it has something to do with what this machine does? But you don't know what it does and you still answered like everyone else. It's going to drive me insane here. But I suppose I should explain what it is now. Although, no, you've been sitting in this office for weeks now, so instead it will be much better if I just show you. To veterans of old campaigns here on the archipelago and back on the continent, the term war machines usually meant something distant, something that, while almost always present on modern battlefields, was no match for experienced soldiers once they managed to get close. Trebuchets and, in recent decades, cannons were certainly powerful and capable of bringing untold amounts of destruction to the battlefield, but in the end they were just machines crewed by men, and these men, if nothing else, could always be reached and then cut down to completely defang their devices. It meant that, despite using the word machine, most of artillery pieces and siege engines were still considered mostly human. Even golems, with their operators locked safely within their protective armor, seemed human-like, what with their design being based on humanoid form. You couldn't look their pilots in the face, of course, but you still knew they were there as their machines stomped ahead in response to their crewmen moving around inside. Not to mention that in times of peace, many golems could be seen on streets or fields, using their mechanically increased strength to help with a myriad of tasks. Overall, the face of the army, despite increasing modernization, remained mostly human-shaped and familiar, so when new weapons of war designed by Arcadian and his students were presented to both rank-and-file soldiers and high officers, they caused no small amount of shock, even before they presented their destructive potential. For these new steam tanks, as they were called, were as inhuman as they could be, hulking, lumbering, steel-plated contraptions, rolling ominously on grinding wheels, with their main structure almost 2 meters above the ground, away from reach of conventionally armed troops. With black smoke belching from their chimneys, these machines could be overdriven for a moment to achieve surprisingly high speeds which, when paired with their mass, meant that they could easily be used to knock any opposition aside should the need arise. The only thing was that with weapon mounted in rotating turret above the ram, chances of any enemy getting this close were pretty much close to zero. Originally, these tanks were designed to serve as nothing more but mobile bunkers, with musketeers using various viewpoints to fire in all directions while being protected by a thick hide of this machine. But as commendable as it was, that first draft was not approved by the army, and by Lord Arius himself, simply because it was way too expensive to try and protect small groups of soldiers in such a way, and instead these machines should be used for something else. So the second version had the bunker replaced with rotating armored cannon emplacement, effectively turning it into mobile artillery, capable of delivering devastating strikes from unexpected angles. And all of that would have been perfect, if not for the fact that the recoil of said cannons was so strong that rivets that kept the turret in place gave way after firing several times, which caused the entire contraption to fall apart. But then, finally, inspiration struck, and Arcadian with his students delivered something truly remarkable. Instead of ammo store, they installed a massive tank on the back of the machine, hence its name, and filled it with flammable oil mixed with ground crystals extracted all across the archipelago, for, despite their obvious use in magic, they were still nothing more but extremely potent sources of energy. Then, the tank was linked to a pump that launched its contents well over 100 meters, spraying the flammable substance in a cone, and then, at the very end of that pump, there was a small lighter that ignited the oil as soon as it left the barrel, which resulted in a deadly cloud of flames sprayed indiscriminately by this machine. And the results of test drive were nothing short of astounding. With proper positioning, a single one of these vehicles could set an entire company of men ablaze, killing dozens on the spot while sending others running in blind panic, though I am also contractually obliged to inform you, dear reader, that this is supposed to be treated as an analogy. No actual soldiers were harmed during testing of these tanks. Regardless though, these new weapons were bound to completely change rules of engagement for colonial troops, and for their foes, if they were to have any hope of standing against them. Until now, armies usually marched as united blocks of men, with battle lines and tight formations, but with these new tanks on the scene, doing so would be nothing but suicide. If one of them was enough to set dozens of men ablaze with a single attack, an entire group, and they were supposed to operate in squadrons of 4, was more than capable of locking an entire flank, or decimating even the most defensive centers. And now Medzakans had them, while their enemies did not, although to many people this technological superiority was bitter, since these weapons could have made assault on the frosting city a piece of cake. Still, with these weapons now available for construction, colonial forces finally had an ace in their sleeve, something they could use to level the field for the upcoming fight against undead army in the south. And that ace wasn't just the weapon by itself, but the machine as a whole. As was said, until now warfare was still considered to be mostly humanized affair, but now, with these outlandish contraptions rolling towards the enemy, that human face was gone, replaced by cold, unfeeling steel. As first test drive shown, the very presence of tanks was enough to unnerve even veterans, so their impact on morale of actual enemies was bound to be immense, especially when paired with that less than humanitarian weapon mounted on the top. In fact, the impact on soldiers of colonial army was so high that many companies decided to try and imitate that cold, unfeeling aura of these tanks and began wearing faceplates themselves, becoming faceless figures that would bring fiery death to their foes. So, with this new deadly contraption in store, Medzakan factories and forges began production right away. The cost of tanks was quite high, so other forces would not be phased out so quickly, and in fact Commander Brimy was already training his own cavalry brigade, but it was clear that this was truly the advantage colonial force looked for, and now wished for nothing more but to test it out in real fight. Soon, news about another campaign started circulating around the colony, and the army began preparations to move south and face mysterious undead army led by giants. It is a rather common occurrence that when governments start to arm themselves, certain number of their citizens oppose the idea of yet another armed confrontation. And yet, in this particular case, when Lord Arius ordered another recruitment campaign for the army, that pacifistic opposition was unnaturally quiet, and with good reason. It all began innocently enough, with rumours about ships moving across the ocean under suspiciously familiar banners. Discarded at first, these rumours soon became repeated by more and more sailors, including a number of captains who worked directly for the council. Soon, people of Mizaka started to nervously look to the sea, expecting danger to emerge from it, and so another cloud of drones was sent above the blue expanse to find out just how much truth was in these reports. And it didn't take long for this search to bring results. On a sunny, almost completely silent day, operator of one of the drones spotted an entire convoy of heavy transport ships heading towards the archipelago. Using his machine to fly high up, he approached these vessels from above until finally he was able to notice flag that marked each and every one of them. And it was impossible to not notice that said flag was the blue and white trident of Old Kingdom of Southern, only with its colors being inverted. It was perhaps the final insult of the new Republican government. They took the country from King Seron and even took the flag with them and kept it with only single minor change. Some royalists living in Mizaka, not that there were many of them to begin with, were outraged by this, but Prince Arius himself simply dismissed that topic, stating that perhaps Chancellor Ishizawa lacked even basic creativity and that this whole affair fit him rather nicely. He was, in Arius's own words, a thief, and so he stole everything, including the flag. But despite that dismissive tone, many people started to wonder what presence of Republican colonists meant for Mizaka. Fortunately though, the ships spotted by drones were not an invasion force, and instead carried trade goods and building materials. And while lack of invasion army was certainly welcome, cargo on these ships also meant one clear thing, that Republic of Southern was moving here to stay. Even more so, they moved not in an uncoordinated manner, but clearly focused on establishing presence deeper in the archipelago. But as soon as these rumors were confirmed, new ones appeared almost instantly, this time concerning leader of Republican colonization effort, a man by the name of Caval Hegren. An old, respected veteran of many conflicts, including war against the Frostlings that elevated King Seron onto the throne, General Caval was widely known and respected as shrewd strategist and kind spirit, capable of inspiring people to follow him through countless dangers. And yet, his presence was still quite surprising, because he was also a noble, though he changed sides and joined Ishizawa during his revolution, although circumstances of that betrayal remain foggy to this day. Even weirder, he was a friend of King Seron and his children, including Arius, so his presence here in the archipelago must have meant that the Republic, perhaps, was trying to avoid confrontation with Mizaka by sending someone who was on good terms with Lord Governor. Or, as some other people whispered, it was all a trap, and General Hegren was nothing but a puppet, placed in charge to keep appearances, while behind the scenes Republican agents carried out some devious plot. Whichever option was true, presence of southern colonies actually proved to be quite beneficial for Colonial Council, who could use threat of an invasion to convince more people to join the army, or to simply work for it, to ensure that any future clash between people of Southern would not end with their another pitiful defeat. And so, in order to prevent any defeats, Mizakan forces increased their numbers once again, reinforced this time by 4 squadrons of tanks, 16 vehicles in total. They wouldn't be sent to fight people of the Republic, however. Instead, together with Lord Governor and his retainers, the army boarded transport ships once again and departed south. Their objective? To stop a mysterious army of intelligent undead that rampaged all across the island between Dulsmer and Kuzone, seemingly looking for a settlement of forest dwellers. Though, privately, neither Arius nor his retainers actually believed that this was the real objective of these long desiccated soldiers. But whatever that objective was, did not matter. These beings were clearly linked to the elusive pillared city that was first mentioned in Ruined City overrun by Nagas, but by then only a handful of people knew why Lord Arius was so obsessed with that city. To most soldiers, this was yet another campaign to bring some more stability to the islands and hopefully gain some allies in the process by helping Fae that lived in the jungle. And so, after several months of preparations and another few at sea, colonial force finally reached the eastern edge of the infested island, disembarked, and prepared to face their long-dead foes. As always, drones were sent ahead of the main force, both to scout out and to soften the enemy before the main fight, and after a few days, the column of ancient warriors was spotted moving across an open plain. Using their drones as a bait, colonial army lured their foes towards themselves, preparing to fight on the defensive against foes they knew very little about. And when that part of the plan worked, Commander Brimir and his cavalry went sent ahead as well, to harass the Shamblers even more and, hopefully, force them to make a mistake. But unlike that fateful time when Medzakans prepared to fight undead dragons, this time there were no cheering or preemptive celebrations. By now, both officers and regular soldiers knew that this archipelago was not a forgiving place, and so any mistake or overconfidence were bound to be painfully verified. And since the enemy in the front was not well known, when a scout appeared riding hard from the west, bearing news about approaching columns of dead soldiers, the camp erupted into activity. This time, everyone said, with machines of war on our side, things will be different. It was time to see if this new, steam-powered army of Medzaka truly was worthy of hope people of the colony placed in it. Thank you for your report, Lieutenant. Soldiers like you are making our country proud, and I will make sure you will be sufficiently rewarded for your actions today. Now, return to your unit and await further orders. As for the rest of you, ladies and gentlemen, you heard the man. The dead ones took the bait and are already on their way. According to the Lieutenant, they should arrive in about an hour, so I want everything and everyone to be ready in half that time. And don't forget that we're not just here to mindlessly kill them all. If you have a chance, try to capture some of them, especially if they're looking important. They may have information that will be very useful to us in the future. Indeed, that is also one of the reasons we're here. However, I want to make it absolutely clear. Do not risk lives of your men to try and capture enemies, no matter how exposed they may seem. If there is even a slightest chance that trying to kidnap one of them would put your men in danger, do not take it. With luck, we should be able to surround them and force them to surrender. That is assuming they are actually capable of realizing their own situation and are not suicidal. But from our scouts, drones and observers, we know that they certainly are not mindless. They communicate with each other just like we do, although in a tongue we're not really able to decipher yet, and their methodical scouring of every bit of this island proves they're intelligent. That gives me hope that we won't have to defeat them to the last, but as you all know, hopes like that rarely work out. So, I want you all to be prepared for anything, as this will probably be even more challenging fight than the one we had against undead dragons. But as long as we'll stick to the plan, we should be fine. And speaking of the plan, Mr. Vestrand, the floor is yours. Right, so, as you all know, we're up against an undead army that seems to be equipped and organized like a bunch of historical reenactors pretending they're living just a few years after the Awakening. Expect spears, bronze armor, limited cavalry support, and quite possibly outdated tactics. At a glance, it seems like dealing with them should be a piece of cake, but unfortunately there are two issues that will make our job a bit harder. Issue number one are their spellcasters. We know there's a bunch of magicians in their army, but so far we have no idea what kind of power they can bring to the table, so until you know for sure, try to keep safe distance from them. Fortunately for you, that will mostly be an issue for me and my cavalry wing. We will try to get behind their formation and, if possible, take down these casters before they can cause any problems. Otherwise, their ranged capabilities are not great. They do have some old model crossbows, but it's nothing our guns and muskets won't deal with in a matter of minutes. But now we're coming to second, much bigger problem. The giants. It looks like their army is led by those big bastards clad in heavy armor, as most of our scouts reported that they saw them commanding other forces. And we are actually hoping that this will be the case here, because if eyewitness reports are to be believed, these big ones are not just commanders, but also first-wave frontliners. No doubt they want to use their mass and sheer shock potential to break through our lines, but if they're also ones in charge of other forces, then by charging directly into the fray their ability to effectively command other troops and make sense of the battlefield should be greatly diminished. Simply put, we do not expect any fancy tactics from them. They move like well-organized force, true, but it's clear they're used to winning simply by using brute force of their giants, and we can use that against them. And finally, as operators of our drones uncovered some time ago, they have one more weakness, one they share with all other undead we met before. They're all dry as Midzak and pubs after I visit them, and that, kids, is where our new flame-belching toys come in. Sure, these big boys may be strong and 3 times as tall as your average soldier, but that won't help them when they're burnt to ash. And since our tanks are not exactly slow either, we should be able to easily use them to set them on fire, retreat, burn them again, and repeat that until they're down for the count, with artillery providing support from the back all the way. As for the rest of the troops, do try to stay away from the giants and simply let our machines deal with them, unless they decide to throw themselves at our guns, that is. Then stop them with all you have. As for myself and my cavalry, as I said, we will circle round them and then provide as much support as possible. That's it. Stick to this plan, and it all should be over before nightfall. Thank you, Commander Vestron. As you can all see, this battle has potential to turn into a complete nightmare very fast, which is precisely why we should all stick to the plan. It's plain to see for everyone that we can't trade punches with their heavy hitters, so I want all of you to keep your wits about you and always pay attention to where enemies are. More than that, remember that after this battle we still need to secure that forest dweller settlement on the western coast, not to mention that there may still be more of these undead soldiers lurking around in swamps and jungles. So keep yourselves and your men alive, and I will see you all soon. Now, dismissed. Miss Pireni, please wait a moment. I need a word with you in private.
My, I thought you'd never ask. We should make good use of that remaining hour, don't you think? After all, it may be the last time we're seeing each other.
Don't even joke about it. Considering all circumstances, we are prepared as best as we could be, so we will be fine. But on that note, I wanted to talk to you specifically about the plan. I know you're eager to go there and catch some of these undead soldiers to interrogate them about that pillared city, but I also must ask you to keep yourself restrained. No matter what happens, you and your followers cannot break formation out there, or you will put that entire flank in danger.
Yes, I know. And if things go badly and soldiers get hurt, people back home will be angry. If people back home will be angry, they will kick you out of your office, and if they kick you out of your office, we will never have enough resources to actually find what we're looking for. I know all that. I'm not insane. I just like to pretend that I am.
I know. And at the same time I don't. I guess I'm just more stressed out by this battle than I thought, and now more than ever I can't show that fear to anyone.
But fortunately you have me, Your Highness, your most loyal follower, always here to provide whatever help you need. But you're right, we don't really have time to fool around now, so how about this? We do our best out there, bring everyone back safely, and meet back here tonight to celebrate our victory, and forget about all that combat-related stress.
Sounds like a plan to me. Now come on, let me see you out. Stay safe out there, Miss Pireni. We still have much to do, after all. Now then, back to... Oh, Mr. Vestron. I had no idea you're still here, and I had no idea that you smoke. I don't. Or at least not the regular stuff. This one is a bit of a personal blend that I tend to catch a whiff of before battles. Helps me to let loose. And boy, do I have a need to let loose right now.